Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We have Dylan Godsey on with us today. He is managing Serenity House's program for Treasury Rent Assistant Program and the Eviction Rent Assistant Program funding for people in Clallam County. So we're really happy to have him join us and talk about the both. Well, there have been multiple programs. I think they called it Ewrap 1, Ewrap 2, and then Ewrap, and to inform all of us about it. And we can share this information with others in the community. So just a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions, if you will put your questions either in the chat and I'll call on you to ask your question, or if you'd like me to ask it, you can indicate that in the chat. Additionally, you can raise your hand through the reaction button down below if you'd prefer to do it that way. But I like to have the individual that has the question ask their question so that it's a little bit more interactive experience and you don't hear so much from me. So thanks very much for joining us. And this will be recorded on our website. Peggy, help me out here. Choose Clallam first, and then under Coffee with Colleen, or clallam.org and Coffee with Colleen. So please let me know if, Peggy, that's right, correct? It's, I should know this.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah, it's on both now at this point.
It's on both. There's a link.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so with that, Dylan, go ahead and take it. We, once again, really appreciate you joining us and the hard work you're doing to get these funds out to folks that can use it.
Of course, thank you for having me. So my name is Dylan Godsey, and I'm the Director of Coordinated Entry and Youth Services for the Serenity House. We've been doing these eviction rental assistance program and treasury rental assistance programs since about July of 2020. For the most part, our agency provides rental assistances and vouchers for low-income individuals. But in these programs, we were able to provide assistance to a little bit larger span of the community. At this point, we are in the Treasury Rental Assistance Program contract. And in this contract, the goals are to prevent evictions, to target resources to very low income households who are unemployed, and to promote equity in who is served with a focus on equity groups and historically disadvantaged groups. But the criteria for the eligibility for this program is that an individual would be at 80% or below in area median income. And what that looks like, I can pull this up quickly, is about.
You can share screen. Do you want to pull up a slide and share the screen?
At this point, I'm on my phone. Yeah, my computer. They're redoing the networking for my entire office. So I'm doing all of this off my phone.
Okay.
But it's at $39,000 for a single individual, and it goes up gradually with more occupants in the household. So it's that, and that an individual would be experiencing a financial hardship directly or indirectly due to COVID-19 and the outbreak threatening the household, and that the household is then at risk of experiencing homelessness or currently experiencing housing instability. And with those criteria, we're able to assist with rental assistance for up to 18 months. Go ahead.
So you're describing right now the TRAP program or the Ewrap program?
The TRAP program, the program that
Okay.
we're currently in contract with.
Okay.
The TRAP program is set to transition into the Ewrap 2.0 program. And unfortunately for everybody in the community, one of the reasons why these programs have been so difficult to understand and communicate across lines is that there's been so many iterations of this since the beginning. And with the slight language changes and the difference in eligibility criteria or documents otherwise collected, it's created a bunch of confusion as to which one is what and what is necessarily applicable at this moment. So at this very moment, the Treasury Rental Assistance Program is the only rental assistance program for the federal government that we're implementing that has the span to 80% area median income. The other grants that we have are otherwise the Consolidated Homelessness Grant and the Emergency Solutions Grant for the federal government. And those are for low income households for both homeless prevention and rapid rehousing.
So what are those still the consolidated grant
Homeless.
and the consolidated homeless grant? Is that, is there an income threshold for that one as well?
Yes. And at this point, it's 50% area median income. But in times of non-COVID, it has been about 30%.
Okay.
It's usually for very disadvantaged groups. That being said, as far as some of the questions that were being put forward for this program and what I had received from you, Colleen, there was a question that if a landlord could apply on the behalf of the tenant for rent relief. And the answer to that is yes, but it would need an intake from the client nonetheless. And if a client is not willing to cooperate, there is a landlord relief program that Commerce is putting on. And it is on the Commerce website. And I will go ahead and share that with you at the end of this.
Would you like to email me some of the documents and then I can share it?
Yeah, of course. This is just a website that could be available, but anybody who can look up commerce.washington.gov, it's /serving communities and /homelessness. But after that, it's the landlord fund programs, and it has the landlord relief program. So I know there's
we'll get that in the chat, I think.
Yeah,
maybe
we'll get that there. No, that's a mouthful.
Put it in the chat box.
But
yeah.
So as far as landlords applying and landlords receiving relief despite their tenants not necessarily being participatory, we are, we don't have a program that we administer that would help beyond a tenant's non-cooperation, but Commerce does. And the landlord can initiate the process though for their tenant.
And Dylan, is that only for residences or is that also for commercial programs, properties?
This is only for residences.
Okay.
Yes.
So as far as you know, there are no programs out there for landlords that own commercial properties where their tenants are behind or haven't paid?
As far as I know, that is not something that we have the ability to administer.
Okay. You're not aware of one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not aware of one. Going on to the second question that kind of coincided with that landlord application is, what is the process if there is a disagreement between tenant and landlord? And directly for that, there's the pro bono lawyers in town, and the tenant mediation / landlord tenant mediation attorney. And they can get hooked up with the Port Angeles Dispute Resolution Center. And from there, they can follow, and make a appointment for the landlord and the client to meet and try to figure things out. Who receives the payment for these rental assistances? The landlord receives the payment directly. However, there was a option in it for us to be able to pay the tenants if landlord has not and does not comply. But we haven't had many situations where that had to be the case, or at all, that I can say at this point. How many applications have been processed so far? We have, as of yesterday afternoon, 425 applications processed for the Treasury Rental Assistance Program alone. I know we had close to 400 with the Ewrap program initially, and in that program we only had $800,000 of funding, which we spent out as immediate as we could. We got it spent before the end of December, and we're given more funds to hold us over because we spent it quickly, and they had expanded the program after December to continue to June of 2021. However, with our spending of it, it was completed in March. The last payment was sent out, and by April we received the contract for TRAP, and by May it was being actuated. So since then we have spent a little north of $1,040,000 on those 425 Treasury rental assistance applications. And we've had a pretty steady flow of 30 to 40 applications for either rent or utility come in weekly. It's been pretty close to, on average, of $150,000 of rental assistance payments going out every 2 weeks. However, that does include some of the other rental assistance programs that we also actuate. Let's see. And just as far as clients served from last year to this year, in the entirety of 2020, we had served 3,080 clients, of which 472 were rents paid for eviction prevention. And in 2021, we have served, now this number is about 3,800 clients from January to current, and we have paid 425 rents and utilities.
So is that 3,800 households, or does that include all the family members in a household?
It would involve any actual client receiving a direct service. So whether we have to actually make a referral for the client, or provide a rental assistance, or they're actually enrolled into the program. There are sometimes in the family shelter, some of these other programs where there are dependents, and the whole family does benefit from it. But for the rental assistance program alone, it's applications. When I'm saying 425, and I'm saying 472 for the year previous. The other numbers are inclusive of the other services, housing, shelter that we do provide.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so right now you're finishing up the Ewrap 2 program, is that right?
Correct. So what is now happening is that the Commerce was appropriated $403 million of the coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds last session. And instead of embedding these funds into the existing TRAP contracts, they decided to create a rental assistance program modeled after the original eviction rental assistance program in order to fully utilize the flexibilities of the funding. So the new program is called Ewrap 2.0, and the funds are available through June 30th of 2023. So it gives longevity to this program as they saw that the velocity of spending across the country was very low. Just in an application, being able to collect these applications and also the supporting documents that are necessary for them, it becomes a 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 time interaction process. And so, and every time having to reconvene, have another appointment when there's, things going on in the client's life, as well as extreme caseloads for our case managers trying to get through all these applications, it just creates a crunch. So if you don't get all of your things in as immediately as possible, it gets behind, because we end up having 40 in that week, and it ends up possibly getting into the next week if they can't get us those documents. So
I'm sorry, Dylan, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask, can you give us an example of the types of documents that renters or landlords need to provide to be able to prove eligibility for the program? And,
yes.
And then also, how is the Ewrap 2.0 that's coming into existence, how is that better or more flexible relative to the prior program? And then how much funding have we received for these?
Right. So let me try to figure
I'll write
out.
them in the chat.
No, you're great. So the TRAP program, the requirements and the documentation are that we have a lease agreement or an occupancy agreement. And the lease allows us to be able to give the client the maximum, and the landlord the maximum allotted rental assistance. There are 2 different peggings of what Commerce allows us to give. We can either give 150% of what the fair market rate is, or we can give 100%. And oftentimes the rentals in this area are not within 100% fair market rent range. They are above, and that is, again, a national trend. And so we end up being able to take care of more rent in the actual rent for people, oftentimes, if they're able to provide the lease agreement. Also, for the client, we need 60 days of pay stubs to be able to process application. And if they have no income, then we have to have them do a self-attestation of income, and that their lack of income is due to COVID or to the economic crisis due to COVID.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then moving into, I think your next question was, how is Ewrap 2.0 different than TRAP as far as what the eligibility and what is supposed to be the advantage of it all is. It's supposed to have simplified reporting requirements, and all of what that means, it hasn't been fully explained yet. the report forms are able to be billed multiple times a month. But what we were told with Ewrap 2.0, which was different than TRAP and the Ewrap previous, is that we were able to request a percentage of the funding in advance, so that way we could get the velocity of this funding out quicker. And that's the most hopeful news that we've had yet with trying to get this money dispersed. As a nonprofit, we don't make very much money from our thrift store, and therefore the coffers to be able to cover all the rental assistance that we could possibly get out at the time is limited to what money we have readily available, what credit we have readily available. And so within all of that, having about $150,000 of rental assistance going out every 2 weeks, and having 65 employees with, there's a bunch of logistical things that we have to figure out.
So we've been hearing at the national level that only about 11, I think the last I read was 11% of the rent relief funding that the federal government has appropriated has been distributed on a national level. Can you share with us, and maybe that's a question for Sharon too, who's I see has joined us. How much how has our state done, and how has our county done relative to that national statistic?
I can't speak directly on the state, but I can tell you a little bit about us. I actually, as a county, I know that we have also received Treasury rental assistance programs in various areas, and I know that the tribes all have received their own Treasury rental assistance funding too. So the fully inclusive understanding of what the spending for the county is, I really can't speak to directly, but I can say that the $1 million, or about a little over $1 million that we have spent so far, it's over the national average, and it's closer to a quarter of what has been allotted to us that is directly for rental assistance, and not otherwise admin or the operational costs for everything.
So do I understand then that if you've spent a quarter of it, that there's another 3 million that's available for tenants at this point, that if they live in the county and meet the
of course
criteria established? Okay.
Yeah. Correct. Yes, and that's available up till we have the new funding source come through, and thereafter it will be Ewrap 2.0. And now leading into that, I have nearly $5 million appropriated for 2 years. These budgets aren't finalized, and so we'll caveat that, but it's at $4,915,000 that we have allocated right now for rent and utility assistance in the Ewrap 2.0 going into June of 2023.
Okay, great. So I see Sharon has joined us, the executive director of Serenity House. Sharon, do you want to add anything to the conversation?
Yes, of course. In 2020, we received the Ewrap funds in mid-November, and we were able to spend out all of those funds, and we received more. By the end of December, is when we did our TRAP last year, or Ewrap last year. And Dylan, that was, you said about 400 and...
Yes, it was 472.
So within about 45 to 50 days, we were able to spend out all of those funds in the community. So we were one of the few agencies in the state that were able to spend it out and receive a little bit more.
Oh, that's good. Does that kind of speak to the demand that we have in Clallam County relative to other counties?
I don't know whether I can answer that or not. I'll look that information up. I heard what you said about, how do we compare to the state? So I'll take a look at that and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I know Audrey Grafstrom had a question. Audrey?
Yes, thank you, Colleen. Dylan, you just mentioned rent and utilities assistance, and I have a flyer from Ewrap that mentions that as well. It's not real. It's not in the forefront. But so, what is different for utilities assistance? What are you offering in that regard?
And Audrey works for the city of Sequim, is the clerk and treasurer for the city of Sequim. Forks, sorry.
The specific question is what utility assistance is provided through TRAP?
Correct.
Similarly to the rental assistance, we're able to provide up to 18 months of rental and utility assistance, and that includes up to 3 months going forward of rental assistance. I don't believe that utility assistance has the forward payments, and that's the only difference between the rental and utility assistance that we do provide. But we're able to get people caught up with rental and utility arrears since March of 2020. And again, it has the same the criteria of the income and being at or below 80% AMI, and the experiencing financial hardship directly or indirectly to COVID.
It seems if it's indirectly to COVID, couldn't anybody certify that it's indirectly to COVID?
More or less at this point, yeah.
Okay.
I think there are very, most people can explain that at this point they've been affected by COVID, and that for that reason they have been, well, most people haven't been able to either keep up with their rent or utility because of that.
Something you talked about, that you can pay out 100% of market value, but frequently 150% of market value, or 100% of the fair market value, or 100% of the rent. And is that whichever is lower?
No, so we can either pay 100% fair market or 150% fair market, but we only are able to pay 150% fair market if we have a lease in hand, an actual lease that was made between the rentor and the landlord.
Okay.
And that allows us to pay, and I'm sorry I don't have this directly in front of me, but the fair market rent rate is I believe close to $790 for a single bedroom, and so 150% of that, goes up per bedroom.
$1,200. Okay.
Kind of going back to the utilities, Dylan, we have the agreement with PUD that they are advertising that their clients behind, and it's right in the utility bill, that if they need assistance with utilities, that they have put in their actual insert to the bill, that they can contact us, and we meet with that utility and on a regular basis, and and this is PUD, we meet with PUD. So if Forks is not doing that, maybe we should explore that.
Yeah, so Audrey, do you have customers that are behind in their water payments?
We have customers who have not made a payment since February of 2020. And we are in the process of sending out a flyer to, running our shut-off list as we would normally process it, and then sending out flyers, informing them of the assistance available. So yes, that would be great, Sharon, if we could.
Yeah. So your local representative is Bill, and we have an office up there. Maybe we can have Bill meet with Audrey, Dylan?
Yeah. Yes. Well, and even better, Audrey, if you know anybody who needs assistance, today we have a outreach event in Forks that's being set up in the next hour at the transit center there. And I will also call Bill and have people part of that outreach group come directly to your office if that's possible today, and try to get the information and contact these individuals as quickly as possible.
That would be great. Thank you.
So, and I know, are you guys working with the city of Sequim? They of course also have water and sewer that they provide to customers within the city limits?
Yes, I mean, I have given this information out to all these entities, and we have been issuing rental and utility assistances for people whom live in Sequim as well. Yeah.
Got it. Great. So how that $790 for one bedroom, that from what some research I've done seems quite low. How is that number set? And are you ever finding written leases where they actually are at or below the quote unquote fair 100% of fair market value?
Yes, but here's how I speak to that. So the fair market rent rate is calculated by HUD. It's done nationally and broken down to state and county. And yes, we do find rentals that are in that range, but not recently. And more often than not, they're not rentals that most people, they're trailer park rentals. They're, oftentimes a bedroom in a house kind of thing. It's not necessarily, a house in itself rental or an apartment that's available for people. There are low income tax credit units that are spread across the county, more so in Sequim and in Port Angeles, that do and are able to provide rental rates in that ballpark, but seldomly in the private market. And I'd say more often not at all in the private market do you really come into that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it. So Debbie, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. What if someone rents out a room in their home and the person pays only a portion of the rent and utilities, has been unemployed since March of 2020, but was getting unemployment, and of course, that has now stopped. Can they apply separately from the other members in the home?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have to have a written lease agreement?
You have to have a written lease agreement to be able to acquire the 150% fair market rate. But an occupancy agreement is something that we often do for individuals who are trying to be rapidly rehoused, and we can help those individuals with that process as well.
Mhm.
What
And
if-
so, oh, go ahead.
what if someone, I have this situation with someone, they moved out, the other partner moved out, his name is on the lease, hers isn't, so how would she be able to apply to keep a roof over her and her kids' heads when he's taken off?
So
Is she on the lease?
it would
The
be
lease
us,
is in his name, not in hers. Her name is not on the lease.
it would be us providing, we can help with what is called an occupancy agreement.
Okay,
And if the landlord is willing to fill out that occupancy agreement, it will serve in purpose of a lease. It's more or less a very, very simple lease,
okay.
because it gives the terms of what is expected monthly for rent, where the location of the rental is, and the parties involved agreeing to that case.
So I know we've got a lot of people on the line that work with people that are homeless or, from obviously Serenity House, but then also I see some folks with St. Vincent de Paul and Clallam Mosaic. Do you guys have, and also some employers that may have some employees that have are having trouble with paying their rent because perhaps they've been laid off. Do any of you all have any questions of either Dylan or Sharon? I know one of the questions that we got was, how long does it take typically from the beginning of the process when someone contacts Serenity House to say, hey, I'm in trouble with my rent, or how long does it take for a check to be cut to the landlord? What's that typical timeline?
It's somewhere between 30 and 45 days, depending on whether the client got all the paperwork in or not.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, and I see Mike McAleer has a question. Do you want to ask that, Mike, or I can read it here? Dylan, what are the hours of operation and location for people from SQUIM? How long does it take to get an appointment?
So an individual from SWIM at this point can visit the offices on Monday until I just hired somebody for my SWIM office full time. They will be in SWIM from October 4th on full time, 5 days a week, from 9 to 5. And that office at this point for the next couple Mondays will be staffed from 9 to 5 on Mondays. If a individual in SQUIM wants to call our housing resource center here in Port Angeles, we are just as able to provide a on the phone appointment for them. And if they needed to come in and walk into the Port Angeles office, we can make that happen until we have the SQUIM office open and operational 5 days a week and starting in October. Our phone number I can put here in the chat, and our receptionist will be able to make an appointment with one of our 15 case managers for that.
Where is the office in SQUIM, Dylan?
It is located in the same parking lot as the thrift store, the Serenity House thrift store. So it's right next to the Mariners Cafe and right next to the Wells Fargo Bank there.
Great. And Andrea, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Dylan, I just was wondering, does that SQUIM office accept walk-ins, or will it once it's fully staffed?
Yes, it will.
And then also, okay, right now, is it accepting walk-ins or
Yes.
does they have to appointment? Okay, on Mondays, they can walk in.
Yes.
And then I just want to know how, I'm the director of the Sequim Food Bank and also part of the Sequim Health and Housing Collaborative. And I just want to know how we can help you, make sure that the people that we work with and the outreach team that we have through the SHHC can help you make sure that all the paperwork is ready. Are we able to have the applications in hand for our outreach team? I mean, is that something that's possible? We just want to know how we can help you. So the people that do need assistance can, have everything ready and get it done so it doesn't backlog you guys.
I love that. I really appreciate that. So at this point with the Treasury Rental Assistance Program, because of the paperwork really changing as often as it has, we haven't had other agencies trained or given this paperwork to fill out because it over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, we can have a paper, a whole form change, and then that creates a unintentional pause in people's application processes, because then we have to redo paperwork that either needs more information or is not applicable anymore. However, with the Ewrap program, it may be a much simpler application with very few changes, so that could be the case. And I would lend to try to figure out one that is in hand, and maybe making some meetings that we could do some cross training and figure that kind of thing out. At this point, I don't know if you have our current flyer or not for the Treasury Rental Assistance Program, but if you do not, we can get that to you. And also, if there's any outreach event that you are hosting, or if there's any way that we can get some individuals there on your high traffic days, I'd be more than willing to try to figure that out to just better get the word out and try to serve that area.
Thank you, Dylan. Yeah, that would be great, especially, in regards to this Sequim Health and Housing Collaborative meeting with our outreach team. That would be great whenever you have, sorry, my dog needs to go out. Have that information ready,
Right.
and meeting with our outreach teams that we have through the collaborative, and kind of helping train them, and they can kind of give a heads up and just help you guys have everything ready in hand. And then we are planning on working on events to help with the rental assistance at the Sequim Food Bank when we're open. So
Okay.
that would be great if you could, just circle, if we could get you connected with our outreach team
I'd
and
love
get
that.
all that planned and stuff. That would be great.
Yeah. So I will put my phone number in the chat, and anybody who would like to reach out to me to try to figure this out, let's do it.
That would be great.
So
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew. We could put the flyer in the chat if Sharon or Dylan want to email that to me. I can load it up into the chat box.
Okay, I will email it to you.
Great. So I see also that Marnie has a question. Marnie, do you want to ask your question? She wrote, what recourse or assistance do you have for a tenant that is already applied with you, but their landlord is not cooperating? And now is that because potentially the landlord won't get as much funding as the normal rent amount would require, and they have to agree to forgive that rent amount if they get the funding through Serenity House?
Right. It's because in accepting this rental monies, they're accepting to basically forgive the client's debt and accept that as payment, and that's going to allow them to continue to be in their rental. And I believe there's even, I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe there's even language in there asking to extend the lease or give the party who's applying for rent assistance the ability to extend the lease with the landlord.
Okay. For how long of a period? Do you know?
I will have to get back to you on that. I, off the top of my head, that's something I wish that I had that for you, and I don't right at this moment.
Okay. And so can you say again when Ewrap 2.0 goes into effect?
Ewrap 2.0 should be going into effect by mid-October. We had submitted our opting in and our initial application. And so it's supposed to be by the mid-October time that we deobligate the rest of the TRAP funds, and in that they will find out what funding they can pull from that left over and also wrap it into this rental assistance program.
Okay. So let's see, does anyone have any further questions? I know Mike Flynn, you had emailed some to us beforehand. I think we got your questions answered.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, good. Sharon, is there anything more you wanted to add?
Oh, no, I'm just very appreciative that you invited us to this forum to speak. I think the more we can get the word out, the better we can do as a community.
Mhm. And so I mean, if I were talking to someone, I'd be saying you can get up to 18 months of rent. And is it rent and utility assistance paid?
Yes.
Okay. So there's no cap amount then?
No, the amount of it is only capped on what their rent is actually, and how that coincides with what fair market rate is.
Okay. I see. Yes.
Colleen, Teresa Buckland had a question.
Yes, Teresa.
So I was just trying to type fast enough. I'll take it back out of the chat. So I just want to make sure I understood correctly that landlords, if they're part of this program, are agreeing to three things. One, that the rent that they receive from their client is less than what would be normal that they would be expecting. Two, that they have to forgive past rent debt that the client has. And three, that they have to be willing to sign a lease to allow the renter to continue to rent from them going forward. Are those conditions for the landlord?
No, so the conditions are not that the landlord has to accept lesser rent. It's in the case of not being able to provide a lease that they're limited to 100% fair market rate, which is the HUD allotments of what any of these federal programs can pay for a studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom going up. The opting in for a continuing on the lease, I don't believe that's a condition. I believe that's an option. And I will definitely clarify that. And as it's something that I believe was part of the second TRAP, and yeah, I'll clarify that. I apologize for not having that information for you right this moment.
Oh, that's okay. I was just trying to understand correctly.
Yeah.
It does sound like, though, that landlords may have to be agreeing to receiving less rent per month when you mentioned that it has to be limited to 100% of market rate. So,
well, yeah, I mean, they if they are choosing to apply for this rental assistance and they don't have a lease, so it's not giving the client or the landlord really a firm, and really the program is to keep clients in their housing to prevent homelessness. As much as it does, and it should, and it will help landlords, it isn't directly intentional for that sole purpose. And for that reason, they do have a secondary program to help landlords with the landlord relief program. That being said, the 100%, 150% fair market rate is really not anything. Oh, go ahead.
So
Okay.
go ahead, Sharon.
So in terms of the landlords and their cooperation, that is one of the things that our case managers do work with, and they work with the landlords directly. And we actually do have landlord meetings, and Dylan has gone out to all the apartment buildings and has met with landlords throughout the community. In fact, some of our most successful things in Forks has been him going out to the trailer parks and working with the owners of the trailer parks. So we do actually do more with landlords. We allow them to apply on the behalf of their clients, on behalf of their renters. And when that happens, then we step in and work as negotiators between the client and the landlord as well. So there was a lot of landlord questions over here. That we cannot obligate the landlord or the client to accept the program. We can offer the program and help facilitate the results, right? In how much rent they're going to get. And each case is very, very different. So it's really working with the individuals on an individual basis to make sure that they have the rental agreements or the occupancy agreements that they need in order to qualify for the program, which is where our case management comes in.
What was the part I may have just misunderstood when I heard about forgiving past debt? So if a person has months and months of rent that has not been paid in the past, how is that dealt with?
So typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dylan, but in the Ewrap program, we paid up to 80% of the rent, right? So the landlord actually had to reduce their income by 20%, which was very debatable when it came out, but it is what the program is. So that is a decision that the landlord themselves have to make, right?
Yeah, when we're recouping funds or not having funds, there's some interesting criteria that have been put up in the initial Ewrap and the TRAP that have been points of discussion, and I believe they're not going to have those conditions for the Ewrap 2.0 as they're really trying to make it as flexible as possible. Yeah, it just is the case every time I've had a conference with other providers that are doing this. Those same concerns that you had levied are things that we've had worked through and talked to Commerce with, and they're actively trying to pursue to change, and is the reason why they're trying to go away from this TRAP program and into this new Ewrap 2.0 program.
How will the governor's proclamation that basically the bridging resolution for evictions through September 30th, how will that affect this program or your work and the number of applicants you may see?
Well, it's definitely going to drive up the numbers once there is a reason for people to take hold and notice that that protection, that moratorium is no longer there. What we saw initially with Ewrap was that people were of the mindset that the moratoriums were going to be ending at the end of 2020. I mean, it was kind of a growing perspective. They're saying, okay, well, this has to end at some point. with all these new stimulus monies that are coming out, with all of these businesses kind of trying to go back to opening, with the vaccine on its way in sorts, there was an expectation that the moratorium was due to end soon. And so I think that gave a lot of momentum for the initial drive of getting these rental assistances out there. And I think that it just being a topic that it becomes real again for a lot of people, that this is one of the only other options to keep them housed and otherwise for landlords to get their monies if they would like to recoup that, and or if they're going to evict an individual. So it will be very interesting. It will.
Okay. So you don't have any predictions then, really, or do you? Like what you expect to see come October? Do you expect a lot of landlords will be evicting the tenants? And are you seeing a lot of these, your applicants are in apartment buildings typically? Because we interviewed, you were there, a bunch of property managers, 3 property managers from across the county, and they had very few tenants that were behind. But I think they also kind of, when people apply to be a tenant, they pick the cream of the crop of the applicants.
Right.
And so, you know, that's not necessarily the folks that are struggling economically go, you know, and live in a rental house.
Right. How do I answer this best? I do predict that we're going to see a fair amount of evictions. I think that there's just been a growing sentiment over this past year that people were burdened with having to be forced to deal with this moratorium and all those things. And so having to maintain a rental of which there is going to be government oversight and preventing them from being able to do removals and this and that. I think that just, it has at least it's from what conversationally, there is a sentiment that's disincentivized people from wanting to do that. And I do know that our market rate for selling houses is an all-time high. So you're kind of at a position where people are able to sell houses, make as much money as has ever been able to be made on housing out here, and also get out of rentals that or programs that they thought were going to be a lot easier to manage, but with not being able to physically travel here or those other limitations for investors who have rentals like that. Yeah, I do predict that we're going to see some impact from that for sure. It's just.
Yeah, one more thing, I think that it will be affecting things there. I put in the EDC newsletter an article from Fortune magazine about a mortgage abeyance program that expires on October 1st as well. So their prediction is that a lot of owners of homes that are behind on their mortgage payments will go ahead and put their homes on the market rather than trying to catch up with the mortgage that they have in default. So the expectation is that there will be a lot of homes coming on the market towards the end of the year, which will of course soften the market. And from several reports we've seen, the real estate market has begun to already soften. So, I think there'll be a correction coming here based on some of the input that you have provided and others. So I see it is 9:01. So I think we will call it a morning and try to be respectful of people's time. Dylan and Sharon and everyone that joined, thanks so much for joining us and being part of this really critical conversation. And I did say I would put the flyer in the chat, but I'm not.
I will send that out. I apologize about that. Yeah, I will get that and a couple of answers to some of these questions out to you after. Is
Okay.
that something we
Yes.
decide after?
Yes, I
Okay.
can put that in our newsletter. So if you'll do that, I'll stay on and I'll put it in the chat if anybody wants to hang on for a few more minutes and get that flyer from Dylan. So with that, I am going to stop the recording, and thanks everybody for joining us today.